Hello, this is Jackie Cohen, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Monday, July 13th issue of the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Launch boom strains Kennedy Space Center. Without upgrades, spaceflight aims could falter. As NASA works toward returning astronauts to the moon to stay and then onward to Mars, Kennedy Space Center remains the hub of that ambitious effort. But a June report by the space agency's chief watchdog warned of major Earth-based risks to these plans. Everything from bridges, roads, and electrical power to nitrogen and helium gas supplies requires upgrades at a facility built in the 1960s for the Apollo program and later modified to support the space shuttle, which retired in 2011. Today, these facilities are becoming increasingly dated and lack the capacity to meet the demands of the burgeoning commercial space industry, concluded the Office of the Inspector General's June report, titled NASA's Launch Infrastructure. Without timely fixes to NASA's launch infrastructure challenges, ambitious national goals to return humans to the moon before the end of the decade and accelerate missions to Mars could be at risk, the report said. The OIG report noted that in just the past 5 years, launches from KSC rose 252%. In 2020, 31 rockets took off from Florida. That number jumped to 109 in 2025. By 2028 and 2029, KSC could be operating near capacity as companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are projecting ever-increasing numbers of launches. Kennedy Space Center Director Brian Hughes told Florida Today, part of the USA Today network, that KSC is working closely with partners and other agencies to address and pay for the most pressing issues, which he identified as upgrades to wastewater, electricity, and things like fuel supply pipelines. We are aware of the challenges ahead and are addressing them. Here are the main concerns that the OIG report outlined. NASA lacks funds to maintain infrastructure. The OIG report said that NASA needs more than $1 billion to address aging infrastructure at KSC. NASA KSC received $254 million through the H.R. 1 reconciliation bill to support the construction, repair, and improvement of critical infrastructure and facilities. Sasha Sims, Director of Spaceport Integration and Services, told Florida Today via email. Following enactment, KSC conducted a comprehensive prioritization, which identified 38 projects addressing the most pressing common use infrastructure needs. Hughes said that's where issues like upgrades to wastewater and electricity rose to the top, and he noted that the agency isn't solely dependent on the NASA budget to get the work done. We don't simply live or die on NASA's budget. We also have some capacity to work with Space Force and do some collaborations with other agencies, said Hughes. Hughes told Florida Today that the Roy D. Bridges Jr. Bridge, used by the Space Force, is in need of attention. KSC is working with the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Florida Department of Transportation, and Space Florida to obtain those funds. One issue the OIG report raised is that while most of the launches from NASA centers in recent years have been from commercial partners, such as SpaceX, ULA, and Blue Origin in Florida, the space agency hasn't yet put into place a process to collect funds from those companies to pay for infrastructure upgrades. The report said that NASA proposed establishing an infrastructure investment fund, which would allow the agency to collect funds for long-term use of infrastructure, but that has never been enacted. Under Commercial Space Launch Act agreements, NASA is limited to collecting only direct costs from a partner, and no mechanism exists to collect funding to support improvements to capital investments on shared infrastructure without augmenting the agency's appropriation, Sims wrote to Florida Today. Complex 39 faces heavy launch load. Launch Complex 39 at Kennedy Space Center consists of 3 launch pads, Pad 39A, Pad 39B, and the never-utilized Pad 39C. SpaceX signed a 20-year agreement with NASA to operate from Pad 39A in 2014 as part of the Commercial Space Launch Act. SpaceX has served as a major launch provider for the agency, launching its science missions and astronauts atop its Falcon rockets. SpaceX did pour in its own money to redesign Pad 39A for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launches. More recently, the company built a Starship tower on the site in preparation for the company's next-generation launch system, which is also being tapped by NASA to support the Artemis moon missions. Starship will serve as a human lander in rotation with Blue Origin's Blue Moon Mark II. And while the lander itself is not yet ready, SpaceX plans to fly a modified Starship to dock with the Orion spacecraft in orbit next year as part of the Artemis 3 test flight. However, according to the OIG report, Starship will need upwards of 15 Starships launching over an 8-day period to carry out the moon landing mission. Overall, SpaceX is aiming to launch Starship approximately 44 times annually from Kennedy Space Center, Pad 39A. Pad 39B upgraded for Artemis missions. To the north of 39A lies NASA's 39B, where shuttles once took off, and most recently, the agency's SLS, Space Launch System, rocket, sent Artemis 2 on its mission around the moon. It's the site for the planned Artemis 3 mission launch next year, as well as the launch site for the planned Artemis 4 moon landing in 2028. Even with the tight budget, NASA has been spending money preparing Pad 39B for Artemis missions. The report said the agency installed new fiber cable lines and liquid hydrogen tanks, replaced fire suppression piping around the launch pad, and even updated the pad's flame trench. NASA also added the emergency egress system for quick escape from the launch tower in case of danger, as well as a lightning protection system. Complex 39 power supply can't keep up. But Launch Complex 39's electrical power system is in poor condition. NASA plans to replace the LC-39 duct banks and the C5 substation transformers at a combined cost of $136 million, with work set to begin later this year. The repairs are expected to take years to complete and could possibly cause delays, the OIG said. Hughes says KSC is already working with FPL on the power concerns. The current infrastructure around electric on-site does what we need it to do today, and obviously we've kept the increased cadence, said Hughes. Hughes points out that there will be more power demand, especially from liquefaction, which is the conversion of liquid natural gas into fuels. SpaceX's Starship will also be a major power consumer at both Launch Complex 39 and Cape Canaveral Space Force's Launch Complex 37. The big issue comes with Starship set to launch from Pad 39A in the coming year, adjacent to SLS launching pad from 39B. The C5 substation currently has a capacity of 30 megawatts of power, with 9 megawatts available to be shared jointly between LC-39A and LC-39B. The percentage allotted to each launch pad varies according to operational needs, the report states. Given variables such as SpaceX's desired propellant loading time, a single Starship launch could exceed the power available at LC-39A, leaving the current supply insufficient. SpaceX plans to temporarily address the limited power supply with Tesla Megapacks, large rechargeable battery systems that can store up to 3.9 megawatts of electricity, but it's a short-term fix as power demand continues to grow. KSC Cape launch infrastructure aging. Although Blue Origin's New Glenn and SpaceX's Starship will operate from Space Launch Complexes 36 and 37 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station respectively, the gas pipelines to those sites are owned and managed by the Kennedy Space Center. Key NASA infrastructure, including Kennedy's converter compressor facility, which turns liquid helium into high-pressure gas, supports launches from KSC and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Hughes says NASA does not have much extra capacity at KSC or on the Space Force Station side. Therefore, KSC is working with the commercial companies on the possibility of a pipeline or multiple pipelines, which will allow a higher rate of liquid natural gas. Hughes says the work has already begun on this project. Sims told Florida Today that NASA plans to use a special program to collect money from the private space companies to help offset operations and maintenance costs. SpaceX and Blue Origin will take up the majority of these launches, but many smaller space companies are also eyeing launches from the Cape. SpaceX plans to launch Starship up to 76 times annually from Launch Complex 37 at the Cape. And while Blue Origin is currently rebuilding after its New Glenn exploded on the pad in March, the company eventually hopes to launch up to 50 times a year from Launch Complex 36. The company is also planning an additional second launch pad at the site, known as Launch Complex 36B. Launch pad space and availability remain limiting factors, Hughes said. He told Florida Today that while NASA does have some unused launch pads, maximizing capacity for uncrewed orbital missions up in Wallops Island in Virginia could relieve some of the KSC traffic. But Wallops Island also was cited in the OIG report as in need of infrastructure upgrades. As for the priority of wastewater infrastructure, Hughes told Florida Today that it remains vital to be able to continue to move wastewater from the KSC side over to the Space Force side where the wastewater treatment facility is located. As commercial providers increase launch cadence, wastewater will increase as well. That issue has been at the forefront of discussions recently. KSC Cape Canaveral roadways aging. Most of the 231 miles of roadways and 6 bridges at Kennedy Space Center and the Cape were built in the 1960s to support the early space race and the Apollo program. With the advance of the commercial space companies, these roads are reaching life expectancy much faster than planned. The OIG report concluded that in just 6 years, the rate of traffic skyrocketed 347%. KSC roads and bridges were not intended to hold the increased rate of traffic and weight of modern operations. As launches continue to increase, it is estimated that an additional 19,000 truck trips per year will be needed to transport materials to facilities and over to launch sites. Sims told Florida Today that while funding for transportation infrastructure was not initially included in the budget provided, KSC uses supplemental funding sources and partnerships to make repairs as needed. Notably, in coordination with the FDOT, KSC recently completed the $128 million replacement of the Indian River Bridge, a primary access route supporting high-volume and heavy transport operations into the spaceport, Sims wrote. As the launch cadence continues to increase, both the OIG report and Hughes noted KSC needs to keep pursuing repair and upgrade work to meet the demand. In NASA, we've done a pretty good job of keeping Kennedy right up to the needs in the present tense, Hughes said. But now what we really need to focus on, while we've got some time before the cadence either triples or goes tenfold, even if you look out in years, not just keeping up with it, but kind of preparing longer term for future missions. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Rochester brings digital tech to garbage truck routes. The city's fleet of garbage trucks is now equipped with basic trash tracking software that will allow workers to access real-time route information and document issues or missed pickups on the road. Karen St. Aubin, the city's environmental services director, said the changes will help make trash and recycling collection smarter and more efficient. We went from a very paper, manual system to a tablet, St. Aubin said. The technology is not complex, but it offers advantages over the city's previous paper-based system. Now, a live map will help substitute drivers navigate routes through unfamiliar neighborhoods. Drivers can also upload photos or messages to inform supervisors of blocked roads or bulk items that might require different equipment. St. Aubin said it will allow the city to respond more quickly. The city also issued a reminder about trash pickup. Set your bins at the curb by 6:30 a.m. on your scheduled collection day. Make sure the handles are facing your property and openings are facing the street. Trash and recycling bins should be 3 feet apart, about the length of a baseball bat or a golf club, to allow space for automated service. Keep containers away from parked vehicles, trees, or other obstacles. The green containers are for refuse only. Recyclables should be placed in the blue container. Vacant Science Parkway land up for bids. Officials invite taxable private investment. The City of Rochester is seeking proposals to develop 2 vacant city-owned parcels along Science Parkway into a site for industrial or office uses. The parcels, 250 and 330 Science Parkway, are located in the Science Park, developed as a high-technology campus in the 1990s. The sites are served by utilities and feature curbing, sidewalk, and other street improvements. The parcel at 250 Science Parkway is 3.74 acres, with an appraised value of $280,000. The parcel at 330 Science Parkway is 5.52 acres, with an appraised value of $390,000. The city's comprehensive plan supports development of the sites for industrial uses like research, high technology and manufacturing firms, with screening and property maintenance reflecting the nearby residential and mixed-use areas. But the request for proposals also notes nearby developments, such as Citygate and College Town, as well as the parcel's proximity to medical facilities. Proposals must comply with the existing zoning, which is the Science Park Planned Development District. Those uses include research, pharmaceuticals, nanotechnology, biosecurity, and more, medical offices, light manufacturing, such as photonics, fuel cell components, or communications equipment, and professional offices. Other tenants of the park include Trillium Health, General Electric Microwave Design Systems, Mastodon Design, and University of Rochester. The city will give preference to projects that are fully taxable and have the least reliance on public funds. The criteria the projects will be judged on includes quality of the plans, compatibility with the market, and market potential in the area, financing, experience of the developer, and project schedule, with a desired 2-year completion date. More information can be found in the request for proposals located on the city's website. Boy dies after country club pool incident. Probe continues as officials rule out foul play. An 11-year-old boy died after he was found unresponsive in a swimming pool at the Binghamton Country Club in Broome County, New York State Police said. Emergency responders were called to the Binghamton Country Club pool on Robinson Hill Road in the town of Union at about 3 p.m. Wednesday, July 8th, after receiving a report of a child in distress, according to state police. A bystander pulled the boy from the water before troopers arrived. Lifeguards and the bystander were performing life-saving measures when first responders reached the scene, State Police Trooper Aga Tinker said. The boy, whose name has not been released, was taken to a hospital in Broome County before being airlifted to Upstate Medical University Hospital in Syracuse for further treatment, police said. He died Thursday, July 9th. State police said the circumstances surrounding the incident remain under investigation. The official cause and manner of death will be determined by the Broome County Medical Examiner's Office, Tinker said. Investigators said no foul play is suspected. New York State Police extend their deepest condolences to the child's family, loved ones, and all those affected by this tragic incident, the agency said in a statement. New York child care costs rank among nation's highest. Single parents devote nearly half their income. New York is the third most expensive state in the nation for childcare, with costs consuming nearly half of a single parent's median income, according to a new WalletHub report. As the cost of living continues to rise and more households rely on dual incomes, WalletHub analyzed childcare affordability across all 50 states by comparing the cost of family-based and center-based care relative to median household income. It costs a lot of money to take care of a child's needs, and many parents are left with the dilemma of whether to forego one salary to do their own child care for the first few years or to shell out a significant chunk of their income for child care services, WalletHub analyst Chip Lupo said. Why New York ranks so high? While New York ranks number 11 nationwide for highest median income among married couples at about $145,000, the burden is much heavier for single parents who have a median income of about $41,000. According to the report, childcare costs account for roughly 38% to 45.5% of a single parent's income in New York. By comparison, South Dakota's child care costs represent about 14 to 21.6% of income. Least and most affordable states. For single parents, the least affordable states for child care are number 1, District of Columbia, number 2, Massachusetts, number 3, New York, number 4, Washington, number 5, California. The most affordable states for single parents include number 1, South Dakota, number 2, Alaska, number 3, Idaho, number 4, Mississippi, number 5, Georgia. For married couples, the least affordable states include number 1, Nebraska, number 2, California, number 3, New York, number 4, Oregon, number 5, Washington. The most affordable states for married couples include number 1, Mississippi, number 2, South Dakota, number 3, Alabama, number 4, Georgia, number 5, Alaska. How WalletHub ranked affordability. WalletHub compared the cost of full-time family-based and center-based childcare in each state and adjusted the results based on median income for married couple households and single-parent families. The analysis included childcare costs as a share of income, including early childcare costs as a percentage of median annual income, daycare costs as a percentage of median annual income. Data used in the rankings were collected as of June 2, 2026, from the U.S. Census Bureau and Child Care Aware. Buffalo area priest faces child porn charges. A Buffalo area priest who has been on administrative leave since 2019 was arrested and charged with receiving and possessing what prosecutors describe as child pornography. Jeffrey Nowak, 46, of Lackawanna, was charged by criminal complaint Wednesday, July 8th, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of New York. The charges carry a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in prison and a maximum penalty of 20 years if convicted. Investigation into Jeffrey Nowak. According to the criminal complaint, Nowak, a priest with the Diocese of Buffalo, was placed on administrative leave in August 2019 while the diocese investigated allegations of inappropriate contact with children and harassment of a seminarian. Federal investigators later identified an email address linked to Nowak that had accessed a New Zealand-based cloud storage service containing files of sexually exploited children, prosecutors said. The FBI executed a search warrant in 2021 related to the email address, but investigators did not find child pornography at that time. The investigation was closed in 2023. The investigation was reopened in 2026 after investigators received a referral involving a Telegram group in which members allegedly participated in Zoom calls where child pornography was viewed and shared, according to the complaint. Investigators linked to a participant using the username Pigboy666 to Nowak, prosecutors said. Search of Lackawanna home. On July 8, 2026, the FBI executed a search warrant at Nowak's residence and seized several electronic devices, including a cell phone, laptop, iPad, and USB storage device. Investigators said an initial review of the devices found multiple folders containing videos of child pornography. Defendants like Jeffrey Nowak go to great lengths to hide their criminal behavior, U.S. Attorney Michael DiGiacomo said in a statement. Nowak has now been exposed and can no longer hide and will be held accountable for his disgraceful behavior. Nowak was scheduled to appear Thursday, July 9th, before U.S. Magistrate Judge Michael J. Romer for an initial court appearance. The case is being prosecuted by Assistant U.S. Attorney Aaron J. Mango and is the result of an FBI investigation. A criminal complaint is an accusation. Nowak is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in court. Ohio law requires public access to college syllabi. A sweeping higher education law in Ohio now requires public colleges and universities to make undergraduate course syllabi public for anyone to see. Under Senate Bill 1, the documents must be accessible online and without user registration, beginning this fall. This law also bans diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on campus and ended faculty's right to strike. State Senator Jerry Serino, a Republican and the bill's primary sponsor, said lawmakers wanted to avoid courses that were indoctrinating students and not presenting them with different sides of different issues. Part of the solution to that was to make sure that we have a proper transparency of the syllabus process, so that professors needed to outline everything they were including, Serino said. What the course objectives were, and are they experienced and qualified to be teaching the course? What speakers are they bringing in? To make sure that we had a good visibility as to the proper balance that needs to be brought to our classrooms in our universities. But professors say the requirement impinges on academic freedom, taking the focus away from students and creating a chilling effect on content. It's going to hurt students, said David Niven, a professor of political science at the University of Cincinnati. Niven, who is tenured, said he doesn't plan to change his syllabi for the upcoming semester, but he worries that colleagues without that shield will feel pressured to steer clear of certain subjects for fear they could be deemed indoctrination under SB 1. The law requires courses to demonstrate intellectual diversity, defined as multiple, divergent, and varied perspectives on an extensive range of public policy issues. It says faculty must allow and encourage students to reach their own conclusions on controversial topics and shall not seek to indoctrinate any viewpoint language critics say is way too vague. We have hundreds of colleagues whose jobs are much more vulnerable, Niven said. They're contingent, they are temporary, and they are being given every incentive to look at the readings on their syllabus and ask themselves, is this something that the Republican majority in the legislature would ever find unappealing? They're being given an incentive to stifle themselves. Niven uses current events as lessons in his coursework. Teresa Kulbaga, a professor of English at Miami University, said she often tailors work off feedback from students. Both worry the law will strip them of that flexibility. For Ohio's 14 universities, the instructor's contact information and course schedule must be included. This requirement does not apply to community and technical colleges. Kulbaga, who is also president of her university's Faculty Alliance, said the union is concerned that posting contact information and lesson plans could expose instructors to attacks from people who disagree with the topics. We don't want anyone to be harassed, no matter what your opinion is politically, Serino said, but added he does not expect such activity to occur. SB 1 does not provide or change funding for public colleges or universities. It's not clear yet how much the syllabus requirement will cost students, taxpayers, or institutions. Many schools are partnering with software platforms to manage the syllabi. For instance, Simple Syllabus reached an agreement with the Inter-University Council of Ohio and Kent State, securing a group deal. Serino said the cost will be offset by the money schools are saving from discontinuing DEI initiatives. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Fortune cookies become a symbol in Tennessee election. With early voting approaching in Tennessee's GOP gubernatorial primary race, U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn's campaign has prompted a surprising question, and it isn't about immigration, President Donald Trump, or diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. It's about whether fortune cookies are really Chinese. On July 7th, Blackburn posted a campaign commercial vowing to fend off China. The melodramatic campaign ad reiterates Blackburn's hardline stance on China that she's held and campaigned on since she entered the Senate in 2019. How hard am I going to crack down on China? Well, here's a clue, Blackburn says, before she begins crushing fortune cookies over a Chinese menu in a makeshift Chinese restaurant full of chopsticks, soy sauce, takeout boxes, and decorative scrolls. Marsha Blackburn worked with President Trump to take on communist China, a narrator says while Blackburn crumbles the cookies, and bold lettering appeared on the screen. Marsha Blackburn will fight to protect Tennessee land from China, the first fortune from the crushed cookies reads. Marsha Blackburn will close loopholes and hunt down communists, says the second. It doesn't take a fortune cookie to figure it out. Here in Tennessee, we're going to stop communist China and protect Tennessee land, Blackburn says, before the sound of a gong and quick pan to a cat figurine, a symbol of good luck in both Chinese and Japanese culture, closes the ad. The main question people seem to be asking about this video is concerning the origin of fortune cookies, which are actually not of Chinese origin. Despite their strong association with Chinese restaurants, fortune cookies are not considered a traditional Chinese dessert. According to the History Channel, most historians trace the origin of fortune cookies back to Kyoto, Japan. The traditional fortune cookies likely arrived in the United States when Japanese immigrants started to move to Hawaii and California in the 1880s and 1900s. The strongest claim for inventing the fortune cookie belongs to Makoto Hagiwara, a Japanese immigrant and manager of San Francisco's Japanese Tea Garden, according to the History Channel. The Tea Garden sourced its cookies from a local bakery called Benkyodo, which claims to have pioneered the vanilla and butter flavoring, the style Blackburn was crushing in her campaign ad. Fortune cookies rarely appear in China, but the reason they are so closely aligned with Chinese culture in the United States is because of the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. The mass incarceration disrupted Japanese restaurants and businesses, and it was during this time that Chinese American restaurateurs increasingly started to include the dessert on their menu. Political world pays tribute to Graham. Colleagues react to South Carolina senator's sudden death. Tributes for Senator Lindsey Graham poured in from his colleagues early July 12th after the South Carolina Republican's office confirmed his sudden death the night before. Graham's death marks the passing of a longtime conservative fixture of the Senate and one of President Donald Trump's closest political allies. The lawmaker, who was 71, passed away from a brief and sudden illness, a statement posted to his social media account said, adding, Senator Graham's family appreciates prayers at this time and asks for privacy during this incredibly difficult period. In his more than 3 decades in Washington, Graham played major roles in crafting key pieces of legislation affecting millions of Americans' lives, while also developing a reputation as a foreign policy hawk. The Republican died just a year after helping shepherd through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act as the powerful chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. Trump called Graham one of the greatest people and senators I have ever known. He was always working and was a true American patriot, Trump wrote on social media. Lindsey will be greatly missed. Focus on foreign policy. Graham, an Air Force veteran and former state legislator, served for more than 3 decades on Capitol Hill. He first came to the House of Representatives after victory in the 1994 elections, before later being elected to serve in the Senate in 2002, succeeding Strom Thurmond. He was a major backer of Israel in Washington and a fierce critic of Iran. In a June appearance on CBS News' Face the Nation, Graham said the United States would obliterate the Islamic Republic if the country contested control of the Strait of Hormuz, a key waterway that has become a main point of negotiation in the Iran war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement that Israel had lost one of its greatest friends. Graham had also remained a vocal advocate for Ukraine, even as others in the GOP distanced themselves in recent years from outwardly supporting the war-torn nation. Recently returned from Ukraine. The senator had just returned from Kyiv, Ukraine's capital city, where he met President Volodymyr Zelensky on July 10th to discuss Ukraine's air defense needs and a Russia sanctions bill after attending a NATO summit in Turkey earlier in the week. Good meeting with U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, Zelensky wrote on July 10th on social media. This is already his 10th visit to our port, Zelensky said. I'm grateful to Lindsey for recognizing our warriors. In a statement July 12th on his official X account, Zelensky said he was deeply saddened by the news of Graham's death, calling the senator a defender of freedom and the values that make our world safer. Our condolences go out to Lindsey's family, loved ones, and everyone who had the privilege of working alongside him, Zelensky said. Political world reacts. Tributes for Graham poured in from colleagues and others in the early morning of July 12th. In a statement, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, called Graham a trusted advisor and colleague, saying numerous presidents and heads of state have relied on his counsel. His influence on the federal judiciary, our national defense, and his beloved South Carolina will be felt for generations, Thune said. Senator Mike Lee, Republican of Utah, said he would miss his infectious laugh, quick wit, and enthusiasm for life. Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, said there were no words to describe his impact on the foreign and domestic policy of the United States. He stood solidly for freedom and strength. He fought for liberty across the globe, Wicker said in a statement. Lindsey Graham can be succeeded in office, but he cannot be replaced. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, in a Facebook post, remembered Graham as a statesman and friend. My prayers are with his sister and the rest of his family, Scott said. From his humble beginnings to the Senate floor, Lindsey always led with faith, family, and South Carolina first. Lindsey remained committed to public service and doing what he loved. He always introduced levity and brought wit to the most challenging moments. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster called Graham the fiercest of fighters for South Carolina and America in a statement posted to X. Lindsey Graham is irreplaceable, he said. The Three Amigos. Longtime Graham family friend Meghan McCain, a former co-host of The View, mourned the senator's death in an early morning social media post on July 12th. McCain, host of the Citizen McCain podcast, said she first met Graham when she was 11 after he attended a political event with her father, former Arizona Senator John McCain. Graham, her father, and the late Senator Joe Lieberman were longtime friends and dubbed themselves the Three Amigos. My dad was the soul of the group, Joe was the heart of the group, and Lindsey was the fire and humor, McCain wrote. She said the trio remained friends throughout their lives, calling the bond rare and nearly extinct. The memories I will hold dear of Lindsey is that was always the person you hope to sit next to at a dinner party, McCain said. Charming, very, very funny, like so funny he truly could have had a career in stand-up comedy. The news of his sudden passing is shocking and deeply saddening for me and my family, McCain said, noting that Graham was a constant source of support to McCain's widow, Cindy McCain, in the wake of his 2018 death. But in the years after her father's death, Meghan McCain repeatedly criticized Graham, who had developed a close relationship with Trump, a foe of McCain's father. Like many relationships in life, mine with Lindsey was complex in later years, she said. Filling the vacancy. Graham's death has raised questions about Senate Republicans' 52-47 majority. Graham's former seat is now vacant, and former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky has been hospitalized since June 14th. According to the 17th Amendment, governors can make temporary appointments and must hold special elections to fill Senate vacancies. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster would likely appoint a successor to fill Graham's seat and schedule a special election to replace him. The Senate is expected to return July 13th after a 2-week recess. Russia's gasoline output covering 65% of demand. Russian gasoline output fell to a level equivalent to only around 65% of the seasonal average consumption after Ukrainian drone attacks led to stoppages at large oil refineries, according to 2 industry sources and Reuters calculations. Ukraine has intensified its attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure, including large oil refineries, to try to undermine Moscow's war efforts. As fuel has run short and drivers are lining up to fill their vehicles, Cossacks, who have in recent years been used to back up police, have helped to maintain public order at some filling stations. Damage has caused operations to be halted at many oil refineries, including North Sea and Omsk, the 2 largest producers of gasoline in the country. Another large gasoline producer, the Saratov refinery, was also forced to stop production, industry sources said. The sources, who could not be named because they were not authorized to speak publicly, said gasoline production had fallen short of the amount needed at this time of year, when summer weather increases driving demand by between 40,000 and 45,000 metric tons per day, or around 35%. In June, the daily shortfall was 25%. Daily gasoline demand in Russia is around 115,000 to 120,000 tons during peak summer consumption, the sources said. The Russian Energy Ministry did not reply to a request for comment. Government proposals to tackle fuel shortages include ban on exports of diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel. Russia has also started importing fuel. Supplies of gasoline and diesel from Belarus to Russia hit a monthly record in June, while industry sources said that Russia had also started seaborne imports of gasoline from India. Traders said that up to 6,000 tons of gasoline per day are delivered from neighboring Belarus to Russia. Stockpiles are also being tapped. Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak told a televised government meeting on July 8th that the fuel situation remained complex and that it is clear that the current situation at filling stations is causing concern among the public. There are long lines at some filling stations in a number of Russian regions. In the Black Sea resort of Anapa, Cossacks have helped to keep order. Wearing a white shirt and a black fur hat, Yuri Komarov said he was trying to make sure people filled up their cars as efficiently as possible. It's to avoid chaos and ensure that drivers are dispersed among the petrol pumps in a normal way, Komarov told Reuters. He said that people had changed their buying habits since news of the shortages had broken, which was unhelpful. You see, before people used to come to a petrol station and get 10 liters, 2.64 gallons, but now they fill up the whole tank just in case. I think that's the reason for this hype. There is no other way to explain it, he said. Industry sources said the situation on the fuel market should improve in the second half of July, barring any new attacks on oil refineries, as refineries resume operations and fuel imports increase. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. White House sought to sidestep agency. Sources say methods reviewed before firings at Election Commission. The White House spent months looking for ways to bypass a federal election agency and use emergency powers to force changes to voting machines before President Donald Trump ousted its leaders on July 9th, 4 people familiar with the matter said. Some officials were frustrated with what they saw as the Election Assistance Commission's slowness in updating guidelines for states on voting machines, the source said, while some also wanted it to add a proof of citizenship requirement to its national mail voter registration form and address other election-related priorities of the administration. Democratic lawmakers criticized the firings as an attempt to increase its control over elections, which are the purview of the states, and as undermining election integrity ahead of November's midterm elections, when control of Congress will be at stake. Trump fired the bipartisan federal agency's 2 Democratic commissioners and allowed its lone Republican commissioner to resign, Reuters reported on July 9th. The agency's 4th commissioner departed in April. It was not immediately clear why Trump decided to force the commissioners out at this time, or if they will be replaced. The agency remains operational, but without a quorum, it cannot take up any new business, such as implementing changes to voting procedures or the national mail voter registration form. The administration from the start has been working across all agencies and local partners to safeguard elections from fraud and abuse, and investing in a strong infrastructure to sustain that mission, especially in the midterm elections, the White House said in a July 10th statement when asked about the discussions on sidestepping the commission. Trump and his allies have pressed Congress to adopt nationwide voting changes and argued that some voting systems require upgrades as Trump continues to falsely claim that the 2020 election was stolen from him. In a July 9th statement confirming the firings, the White House cited a Supreme Court decision in June that granted the president more power to fire members of independent agencies. The president reserves the right to remove individuals that may not be totally aligned with the important task of securing America's elections, the statement said. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, called the dismissals a brazen attempt to seize control of our elections before a single vote is cast in the midterms. He is gutting the independent agency that certifies voting systems and helps election officials run secure elections, Schumer said. As early as last fall, White House officials reviewed a recommendation from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to declare a national emergency and create a federal task force that could compel states to address vulnerabilities in voting systems without going through the Elections Commission, according to the 4 sources. The ODNI did not respond for a request for comment. The agency at that time was finalizing its probe of voting machines it had seized from Puerto Rico. ODNI officials concluded that there were flaws in the Puerto Rico machines that they believed could exist elsewhere, 2 of the sources said. Election experts have said the U.S. territory, which does not vote in presidential elections, lags the state in implementing the latest voting system guidelines. The report was never published and the recommendation was never acted upon, but complaints about the Elections Commission continued, the 2 sources said. During the same period, the 2 sources said, officials from the Department of Homeland Security, ODNI, and the White House met with the Commission's leaders to discuss their concerns, including flaws that they believed could have contributed to abnormalities in 2020, claims that have been widely debunked. The Elections Commission is responsible for setting guidelines for states on voting machine systems. Some Trump officials have argued internally that there are states operating with outdated software, 3 of the sources familiar with conversations said, and felt the agency was moving too slowly to push for updates. Election administration experts said the commission often moves slowly in its work because voting systems are complex, the technology is evolving, and policy changes involve extensive public feedback. The voting system guidelines haven't been updated too frequently because the process takes a long time, Matt Weil, Vice President of Governance at the Bipartisan Policy Center and a former commission staffer, said in an interview. So yes, there is a slowness, but not that it's a bug, that's a feature of the system. The remaining commission staff can still test and certify equipment, as well as publish research and reports and distribute federal grant money, according to 2 people familiar with the process. Congress approved $45 million for the commission in fiscal year 2026 for grants to states to improve election systems. Since 2018, the commission has distributed more than $1.4 billion for election administration, according to the Congressional Research Service. Doctor hit with surprise $57,000 bill. Wasn't informed that insurance denied claim prior to heart surgery. When Dr. Lindsay Schmidt went in for her heart surgery at Froedtert Medical College in Wisconsin that spring, she believed her insurance would cover the cost. Then she received a text notification for a $57,000 bill. She later learned that her insurance company, United Healthcare, had denied her claim 2 weeks prior. But Schmidt, who opted into paperless communication several years ago, said she never received a notification through text or email, as she has for every appointment or bill from Froedtert and United Healthcare in the past. Nor did she get a letter in the mail, she said. Upon further research, Schmidt realized United Healthcare sent its denial through its online portal, which she does not regularly check. Like many hospitals, Froedtert has financial advisors on staff who are required to alert customers about denied claims and discuss if they want to proceed. They failed to take this step with Schmidt, the hospital admitted in a June 23rd letter to Schmidt and in a written response to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. We've taken steps to strengthen established workflows related to prior authorization, said Susie Falk, a senior media relations specialist at Froedtert. She said Schmidt's experience was an isolated incident. United Healthcare did not comment on its efforts to inform Schmidt about its denial. We encourage anyone with questions about medical bills to contact the number on their insurance card, a spokesperson said. Schmidt, a pathologist in West Allis, Wisconsin, said her experience is a cautionary tale about the complexity of medical billing, even for someone who already works in the medical field. I hope they take this to heart and ask how many other people have they not done that for, she said. According to United Healthcare's denial letter, Schmidt's procedure, an hour-long surgery to address a small hole in her heart, was medically unnecessary because she did not have a history of strokes. Schmidt said she was never informed of the required pre-existing condition. Schmidt is a scuba diver in pursuit of her dive master certification, which will grant her the ability to train other divers. After experiencing several instances of decompression sickness, a life-threatening condition that can occur in the midst of a dive, she received multiple recommendations from healthcare professionals for the procedure. Since this had a possibility of becoming unsafe for me and others, when I walked into my doctor's office to discuss the surgery, he walked in and said, "You need to get this fixed," Schmidt said. Based on hospital policy, the coverage denial of Schmidt's surgery should have immediately triggered a conversation with Froedtert financial advisor, but no one ever called. When Schmidt arrived for surgery on April 9th, she was ushered into an operating room without anyone asking if she intended to proceed as a self-pay patient. Froedtert then billed Schmidt for the surgery without receiving her consent to pay out of pocket, a standard practice for non-emergency procedures. Most patients are provided a self-pay designation form and a financial responsibility disclosure before taking on sole responsibility for payment. It was actually a $103,000 bill, and they were graciously giving me a self-paid discount, Schmidt said. I thought, wow, thanks. A week after Schmidt reached out to several people at Froedtert, the hospital sent her a letter admitting its missteps. According to the letter between Schmidt and Froedtert officials, a physician's assistant should have completed a peer-to-peer review with United Healthcare to reassess Schmidt's case and vouch for coverage. The physician's assistant chose not to make the call because of Schmidt's lack of stroke history, according to the letter. At that point, a financial counselor should have reviewed the case and had a financial clearance conversation, Lisa Barbian, a financial resolution coordinator, wrote to Schmidt. The letter also said that the hospital had internal conversations about Schmidt's pre-authorization denial, but failed to communicate with her. Barbian's letter included an apology to Schmidt for the misstep and said that re-education has been provided to the authorization team member involved. Froedtert waived Schmidt's bill entirely shortly after. Falk said the hospital has taken steps to improve collaboration with financial counselors, reinforce the process with staff, and more clearly identify patients who should receive good faith cost estimates. Schmidt's self-advocacy in resolving her case was primarily driven by her recent discovery of the No Surprises Act. The federal law, passed in 2020, covers patients who receive unexpected bills for non-emergency services. Under the No Surprises Act, if a person is uninsured or relying on self-pay, they are entitled to a good faith estimate of the anticipated out-of-pocket cost if they schedule services at least 3 business days in advance. Patients can dispute a bill if a provider or facility charges at least $400 more than the estimate, according to a spokesperson from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Since Schmidt is insured, experts said her case does not clearly fall within the bill's protected categories. But it provided a framework for questioning Frotert about the billing process, Schmidt said. To avoid receiving an unexpected high-cost medical bill, contact your medical provider and insurance companies before any major appointments. It is best to ask the following. Did my insurance company pre-authorize this care? Is the out-of-pocket cost affordable? Does the treatment have any age or health history pre-authorization requirements? It is important to maintain all documents related to an appointment if you intend to file a complaint. If you believe you received a bill in error, you can call the No Surprises Help Desk 7 days a week at 800-985-3059. You can also file an appeal with your insurance company or file a complaint with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Monday, July 13th issue of the Democrat Chronicle. Your reader has been Jackie Cohen. Thank you for listening.